Hey everybody, welcome to week 15. Yes, we are getting so close to the end. I hope that you're all doing well. Congrats on making it through another week. Last week, we had two modules to go through, the funk and disco one and the hip hop rap one. And so we have 2 more weeks. We have 2 modules and your test 3 plus a couple of other things. And I'm going to get to those near the end of the video along with the question for you and all that. So you definitely want to watch this through to the end because it's going to definitely help you out. So week 15 is, this module covers pop and alternative styles. Next week, we'll talk about Alienated and Back to the Roots rock, and we'll end up with Bruce Springsteen. And so the previous editions of the book had things set up a little bit different, but I like the way that this one does here. It works well for the class. There's a couple of chapters at the end, rock in the 90s, rock in the 2000s. One of the things about this class that I'm sure I mentioned back at the very beginning is that, sometimes you need some distance to really get perspective on, well, what's going to filter through. So one thing that I would always challenge my students to do, just for fun, this was no real assignment, would be to think about, okay, what artists that are popular right now, like if you looked on the Billboard charts, excuse me, and you saw the recent artists, who would be popular 10 years from now, 20 years from now, who would end up in a history book, right? It's an interesting thing to think about because whenever you're in a scene, you sort of think like, this is it. This is great and amazing. And for you personally, it may be, if you go back way to the beginning with Nerdle Nostalgia and all of that, those things fit. I remember a number of years ago, if y'all remember when dubstep was big, and I had students telling me that not only was this the latest thing, it was the greatest thing, and dubstep was here to stay, it was the greatest genre ever. And I said, just wait, life will filter it through and we'll see. And quite honestly, once you had Korn and Britney Spears doing dubstep, you knew that it was the end, right? And so we don't really have good perspective when we're in it. It usually takes a couple of decades to look back and to think about. We've talked about this a little bit. Okay, well, who will actually make it through? And so there's some people that maybe they'll make it through, and some people, probably 90% of the people that are popular right now and the styles that are popular right now, we will not know who they are. And you can just look at the Billboard charts from 10 years ago or 20 years ago, and you'll see exactly what I mean. So it's nice to get the distance. I don't really get into the 90s and the 2000s. One, we don't have the time. And 2 is that it still needs some time to sort out to see. I mean, obviously bands like Radiohead and people like that have had a bigger impact than we maybe would have known at the time. But there are many that haven't. So this particular chapter and module is on pop and alternative styles, and it really sits around the 80s, particularly with MTV. So MTV is a massive game changer, and I haven't really talked about it a whole lot up until now, but MTV went on the air August 1st, 1981, and it was a big game changer, as much as Elvis was in 1956, as much as the Beatles were in 1964. When MTV went on the air, it changed the entire landscape, because now it was as much about, if not more about, what the artist or the band looked like than it was necessarily their talent. Of course, there were artists that were talented that made it. And it's interesting to watch with the rise of MTV, who already had a career going before MTV, who didn't and had a career because of MTV. So the book talks about Michael Jackson and Prince. They had careers. We learned about the Jackson 5. We haven't really learned about Prince yet, but Prince was around. He was making music. He had already had a hit single before MTV hit. But both of them not only rode it to fame, but helped push MTV to greater heights. Certainly Michael Jackson did. All his personal failings aside, when you look back on the history of music videos at MTV and you think about who were the most influential artists, far and away the most influential artists were Michael Jackson and Peter Gabriel, still to this day. They changed the landscape for a lot of people. Michael Jackson with the Thriller video, which was the first what they called long form video. It wasn't your 3 or 4 minute song. It was actually told a story. And if you haven't watched Thriller or you haven't watched it lately, watch the whole thing. I have it on here, because, you know, that was groundbreaking. As much as Beat It was groundbreaking, and Billie Jean for the way that it broke through on MTV, with the way that it helped pave the way for black artists on MTV. Michael Jackson just for a couple decades just kept changing the landscape. Then you have an artist like Madonna, who was popular and famous because of MTV. So Madonna was a post MTV creation, if you will, or artist, if you will. She was not signed to a label, but Madonna, who couldn't really sing that great, but she really got the sense of the times, and then created a lot of the fashion of the times, you know, with the rosaries and the crucifix and the fishnet and the fashion. She was very much into fashion. She came out of the dance clubs, and that really informed her work all the way through. And Madonna, who wasn't, again, nothing exists in a vacuum. Madonna wasn't the first one to be controversial. You had people like Bette Midler afterwards. And of course, but after Madonna, you know, you end up with people like Lady Gaga, who are basically just doing the Madonna playbook, although I would argue with more musical talent. But, you know, the whole role of controversy is always something that goes through and stays through. Then you have a style of music known as New Romanticism that came out of England, also known as Blitz music, because it was largely centered out of the Blitz Club. And with this is where you get bands like Visage, Culture Club, Duran Duran, where the fashion was every bit as much as the music, which then led to the hair bands, which were those hard rock, heavy metal bands that, following the lead of Kiss and the New York Dolls, started combining makeup and big tossed up, you know, aqua netted hair and makeup and flashy costumes. And so that came through. And then you had what was considered alternative rock. And alternative in the early days meant alternative to the mainstream. And so out of alternative in the early days, you had bands like REM, The Smiths, U2, The Cure, who kind of slid over into goth music that you'll learn a little bit about next week, and alternative rock, which ended up becoming very, very popular and eventually became mainstream and therefore was no longer alternative. So you're going to learn about all of that this week. And, you know, a lot of these, you know, bands and songs may be very familiar to you, but it's interesting to think about how they fit into things. It's also interesting to think that Michael Jackson, Prince, and Madonna were all born in the same year. They were all born in 1958. So, you know, they were kids when the Beatles broke. So they really came up behind that and, you know, had different influences. And of course, certainly the other interesting thing about all three, Madonna being white, the other two being black, though, is that their influences were largely, dance music, funk, soul, disco. All of that came together. And I also want you to be mindful as you're learning about Michael Jackson and Prince, just to think about not only how talented both of individuals are, but Prince sometimes gets the short end of the stick when they're lumped in together. And yet Prince was really a genius musically, phenomenal guitar player. In those early records, he played every instrument that was on the track, but he wrote nonstop. He was a prodigious artist that was continually cranking. They say that there are enough songs in his vaults right now that he could continue to release an album a year for decades of old Prince material. So all of that is going on. So here's what you've got coming for the week. So you have this module, you have your discussion, your reflection, you have your quiz. You're going to need to reply to this video. And so my question for you is, what was the first video that MTV played when it went on the air? The song title and the artist. It's in the book. Maybe it's definitely on my module, and it's easy enough to find. But I want you to, that's your thing for 10 points. You know, last week I did the extra credit thing for there. I'm not going to do that now. You're going to have an extra credit opportunity for a few extra points in the final. So you have this module this week. You have the week 16 materials, and next week as well as test 3 with a little bit extra. But I think that I've mentioned once or twice that you're going to have something extra. So I was informed by the department that we do these SLO assessment tests. Sorry, not attestments, assessment tests. And you actually took this already back at the very beginning of the semester. It was an extra credit thing. I need to double check if I haven't plugged those extra credit points in for you yet. I will be. It didn't matter how you scored or whatever. But now we have them, and it is part of your grade. Okay, so this is part of the final. This is part of the grades, the count. So there's 3 sections. I said whoops because I hit the tripod. I don't know if it moved or not. Anyways, there's 3 little quizzes. The first quiz, you're going to listen to 5 musical examples, and you're going to have to say what genre they are. So make sure you listen to them. They're MP3s. They're not coming through Spotify or whatever. But I've already double checked them, so they work. But listen to them and then figure out what genre they are. Take the time to listen. These are all from your listening tests. And I hope that you are all listening. There have been a few things coming up that are happening during the course of the semester, particularly lately, where you've written and when I say you, I mean you as the whole. This isn't necessarily you individually. That people have written their reflection observations or their discussions, and it's really made me wonder and question if you're actually listening to the playlists. Remember that that's a big part of this music, and it's going to play a role next week. So the idea is that you get into the material, you watch the video, you listen to all the music so that you can write about what it sounds like. I remember now what kind of happened. When I was doing the grading on the punk assignments, some of you gave me some examples as to how you thought that they were punk, and they in no way sounded like punk. And so my question was to myself, and I may have even mentioned this, was, did you listen to punk music? Did you listen to artists like Black Flag and X and the Sex Pistols and the Ramones? Because I'd be hard pressed to have you make that connection. The other thing that I'm noticing, and I've started changing some of the instructions, is that some of you are just writing your assignment, particularly your reflection observations, just off the intro. And so you're not getting the best grades that you could get because you're not really getting into the material. When I ask you to talk about the early punk bands, and you're talking about the Velvet Underground and Iggy and the Stooges, those were pre-punk. Those were the bands that influenced them. So it's important that as you're reading the textbook, you get the context. So I want you to make sure that you're listening to the music and make sure that you're actually reading all of the materials so that you understand how it works. I can't control that. You can do it however you want, but then that, you get what you get as a result of it. But the textbook lays things out pretty clearly. So back to this 3-part test. Each section, each quiz is worth, I think 30 points. So first one is 5 listening examples, and you have to identify the genre. So I'm not asking you who the artist is. I'm asking you the genre. So they all are your listening, so you should know them all. If you before you take this, if you want to go back, and in the book it actually lists out all of them. You could find them on the playlists. You could find them in my Spotify playlist. I would maybe go back and refresh it, because it could go all the way from the blues up until punk rap or heavy metal. They're not really weird, obscure ones, so you should be able to get it. But that's part 1. Part 2 is where you're given a title of a song, and then you are to match the artist. These again are all from the listening guides in the book. So I'm going to give you a little heads up right now to help you out. Here are the 5 songs, okay? And I'm if you see me looking down, it's because I'm looking down to read. Here are the 5 songs: Peggy Sue, A Day in the Life, Help Me, not Help, Help Me, Money, and It's Like That. Now, if you've done the reading and you've done the listening, you should know these already. You should know what they are, and it is matching, so you can narrow it down. But I'm just giving you a little heads up in case y'all want to go look ahead of time for that. And then the last section, 5 questions, and it's asking you, what genre is most connected to certain sociological trends, okay? So genre, is it blues, folk, punk, rap, any of the genres that we've learned about? I'm going to tell you real quick the 5 ones, so you can go look it up if you want. The first one is slavery and economic oppression in the United States, particularly the southern United States. Second one is Vietnam and civil rights in the United States in the mid-60s. Third one is the hippie drug movement in the late 60s, early 70s. The next one is poor economic conditions and anger at the monarchy in Britain in the 1970s. This is one that a lot of people surprisingly miss, but if you think about, what genres are connected to anger, and you think about England, and you think about maybe some well-known English bands that actually sing about the monarchy, then you'll know, right? I can't be much more plain than that other than telling you who it is, but you should know this. And then the last one is the dance DJ culture that are developed in urban cities in the eastern United States in the late 1970s. Something we recently covered, and you should be able to figure it out. But I would go hunt it down. You should know this. You should know all of these, okay? So that's just me giving y'all a little help. I want you to do well on these. And so there you go. Probably told you more than I should have. But there it is. See, sometimes it's worth it to stick to the end. I know that this is a longer video, but I wanted to get those things in there for you. So hang in there. The end is near. 2 weeks left to go. I've really enjoyed having you all in the class. I enjoy, reading what you write. Please take the time and effort to make it thoughtful and meaningful. Have a great week. Looks like we're in for some good warm weather this week. So do good work, and we'll talk soon.